The Boeing 777 cruised at 37,000 feet above the Pacific, its cabin bathed in the artificial twilight of a red-eye flight. Most passengers slept fitfully, wrapped in airline blankets, unaware that in row 9, seat C, someone extraordinary was dreaming of a different kind of sky. Lieutenant Commander Kira Ghost Nakamura had her hood pulled low, earbuds in, appearing to be just another tired traveler heading home from a corporate conference in Tokyo. The business card in her wallet read, Aerospace Consultant, a convenient lie that covered 15 years of classified service. She stirred as turbulence shook the aircraft, her hand instinctively moving to where her sidearm would normally rest. Old habits. Even in civilian clothes, even 3 months into her mandatory leave, her body remained on high alert. The nightmare always found her at altitude, the same burning cockpit, the same voice on the radio screaming her call sign as everything went white. That's when the cabin door burst open. 6 men in full tactical gear stormed through the aircraft like a black tide, their weapons raised but not aimed. The lead operator, his face hidden behind night vision goggles pushed up onto his forehead, scanned the passenger manifest in his gloved hand. His eyes found row 9 immediately. "Lieutenant Commander Nakamura," he called out, his voice cutting through the confused murmurs of awakening passengers. "We need you to come with us. Now." Kira's blood turned to ice. Nobody had called her by rank in months. Nobody should know she was even on this flight. She pulled back her hood slowly, revealing steel-gray eyes that had seen too much and sharp features that belonged to a woman who had earned every scar, every commendation, every whispered rumor about what she could do in the cockpit of an FA-18 Super Hornet. The SEAL team leader stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Ma'am, there's a situation. Aircraft carrier Gerald R. Ford is dead in the water, 200 miles southeast of Guam. Something took out their entire air wing in one night. Every pilot, every plane. They've got no eyes, no protection, and hostile forces are moving in fast." He paused, studying her face for any sign of the pilot they desperately needed. "Command sent us to find the only aviator crazy enough to fly what they've got left. They said to look for the ghost." Kira felt the familiar weight of destiny settling on her shoulders like flight gear. She stood slowly, her civilian disguise falling away as her posture straightened into the bearing of a naval officer. Around them, passengers pressed against their windows, trying to make sense of the military aircraft now flying in formation alongside their commercial flight. "What's left?" she asked, though part of her already knew the answer would change everything. The team leader's expression was grim. One prototype, untested, probably impossible to fly. He met her eyes. They called it Project Valkyrie. The sky outside had never looked more dangerous, or more like home. Kira Nakamura was no longer sleeping in row 9. The ghost was back. The transfer happened at 30,000 feet, something most people would consider impossible. The CV-22 Osprey had matched speed and altitude with the commercial airliner, its cargo ramp lowered into the screaming wind. Kira stood at the edge of controlled chaos, watching the SEAL team prepare the extraction rig with practiced efficiency. She had performed night jumps, carrier landings in storms, and dogfights that defied physics, but somehow stepping from one aircraft to another, while hurtling through the darkness felt like crossing a threshold she couldn't uncross. "30 seconds, Commander," the team leader shouted over the roar of engines and rushing air. His name was Senior Chief Marcus Webb. She'd learned during the brief transition. 20-year veteran, 3 Bronze Stars and eyes that had seen enough combat to recognize someone who belonged in the fight. The passenger behind her, a businessman who'd spent the entire flight complaining about leg room, watched in stunned silence as she strapped on the tactical harness they'd provided. His mouth hung open like he was witnessing something from a movie. In a way, he was. "Remember," Webb continued, "Gerald R. Ford went dark 18 hours ago. Last transmission was a distress call mentioning unknown aircraft, advanced technology. Then nothing. Satellites show the carrier dead in the water, smoking. The escort vessels are maintaining perimeter, but they're sitting ducks without air cover. Kira checked her harness one final time. The wind from the open ramp whipped her dark hair around her face, and for a moment she looked exactly like what she was, a weapon that had been sleeping, now awakening. How many casualties? Entire carrier air wing, 87 aircraft destroyed on deck or in the air, 214 aircrew. Webb's voice carried the weight of those numbers. Whoever did this, they knew exactly what they were doing. The zip line stretched between aircraft like a steel lifeline over the abyss. Kira had crossed worse gaps under worse conditions, but something about this moment felt different. Final. As if her old life as an aerospace consultant, her attempt at normal, was disappearing into the night behind her. "Commander," Webb said, his tone shifting to something almost respectful, "before we do this I need to ask. The stories about you, about what happened over the Persian Gulf 3 years ago, about why they call you Ghost." He paused. "Are they true?" Kira looked out at the darkness beyond the aircraft, seeing not empty sky but memories. The Iranian stealth fighters that shouldn't have existed. The impossible maneuvers that physics said couldn't work. The way she'd simply vanished from enemy radar before reappearing behind them like a phantom. "Senior Chief," she said, gripping the zip line, "after tonight, you'll know exactly why they gave me that call sign." She stepped into the void between aircraft, her figure silhouetted against the stars like something out of legend. Below them, the Pacific stretched endless and black, hiding secrets that would soon surface. Above, the constellations wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent to the small dramas of war and duty playing out in their shadow. The Ghost was coming home. The Gerald R. Ford appeared on the horizon like a wounded giant, her massive deck scarred by fire and twisted metal. From the cockpit of the approaching Osprey, Kira could see the devastation that had reduced the world's most advanced aircraft carrier to a floating graveyard. Smoke still rose from several impact points, and the normally pristine flight deck looked like a battlefield after the war was over. "Jesus Christ," muttered the co-pilot, his voice barely audible through the intercom. "What the hell did this?" Kira studied the wreckage through binoculars, her trained eye cataloging the damage. The aircraft hadn't just been destroyed, they'd been surgically eliminated. FA-18 Super Hornets twisted into abstract art, EA-18 Growlers reduced to scrap metal, even the massive E-2 Hawkeyes crumpled like paper toys. Whatever had attacked the Ford knew exactly where to hit and how to maximize damage. "Approach control. This is Angel 17 requesting emergency landing clearance," the pilot transmitted, his voice steady despite the apocalyptic scene below. The response came immediately, tinged with desperation. "Angel 17, Ford Control. Clear for immediate landing, Spot 7. Be advised, flight deck is partially obstructed. Emergency crews standing by." As they descended, Kira could see sailors moving across the deck like ants, clearing debris and fighting fires that refused to die. These weren't ceremonial peacetime operations. This was a crew fighting for survival. The professionalism was still there, the naval precision that turned chaos into controlled response, but underneath it all was something she recognized from her own darkest missions, the knowledge that they were completely outmatched. The Osprey touched down with barely a shudder, its rotors still spinning as the ramp lowered. Kira was the first one off, her civilian clothes now replaced by a flight suit that fit like it had been waiting for her return. The deck rushed up to meet her boots, and suddenly she was back in her element. The controlled chaos of a carrier flight deck, the smell of jet fuel and salt air, the barely contained violence of machines designed for war. Commander Sarah Chen approached at a run, her khaki uniform wrinkled and stained with smoke. Her eyes were red-rimmed from exhaustion, but when she saw Kira, something like hope flickered across her features. "Commander Nakamura," she called out, extending her hand. "Sarah Chen, CAG, I've heard the stories." "Ma'am," Kira replied, accepting the handshake. "What's the tactical situation?" Chen's expression darkened. 18 hours ago, we were conducting routine operations when our radar picked up multiple bogies approaching from the northwest. Fast movers, but unlike anything we've seen. They appeared on scope for maybe 30 seconds, then vanished completely. No radar signature, no infrared, nothing. They walked quickly across the scarred deck, stepping over debris and around crash teams still working to contain fires. Our alert fighters launched immediately 6 Super Hornets with our best pilots. They made contact approximately 50 miles out. Chen's voice became hollow. We monitored radio traffic for 3 minutes, then silence. When our search and rescue found the wreckage, there wasn't enough left to identify the aircraft type. Kira felt cold certainty settling in her stomach. Stealth technology. Beyond anything in our intelligence files, these things didn't just avoid our radar, they seemed to bend electromagnetic spectrum around them like they weren't there. Chen stopped walking, turning to face her. "Commander, in 15 years of naval aviation, I've never seen anything like this. Our entire defensive capability was eliminated in under 10 minutes. Around them, the Ford's crew continued their damage control efforts with grim determination. But Kira could see the truth in their faces. They were fighting a war they didn't understand against an enemy they couldn't see. The ghost had returned to find her world changed forever. The briefing room deep in the Ford superstructure felt like a war council in the depths of a fortress under siege. Officers crowded around illuminated displays showing radar tracks, damage assessments, and intelligence reports that made no sense. At the center of it all, Admiral Rebecca Torres stood like the eye of a hurricane, her silver hair pulled back severely, and her expression carved from granite. "Ladies and gentlemen," Torres began, her voice carrying the authority of 30 years in naval aviation, "what we're dealing with is unprecedented. These aren't foreign military aircraft. The technology demonstrated here is decades beyond anything in our intelligence databases." She gestured to the main display, where ghostly radar returns flickered in and out of existence like digital phantoms. The attacking aircraft demonstrated capabilities that violate our understanding of aerodynamics. Instantaneous acceleration from hover to Mach 3, 90-degree turns at supersonic speeds, complete electromagnetic invisibility. Commander Chen leaned forward from her position at the table. "Admiral, our analysis of the wreckage suggests weapons technology that's equally advanced. Precision energy weapons that can slice through hardened aircraft at the molecular level. Whatever hit us, they weren't using conventional munitions." Kira studied the tactical display, her mind automatically calculating approach vectors and defensive responses. The attack pattern showed intelligence, coordination, and most disturbing of all, complete knowledge of American carrier operations. "Ma'am, permission to speak." Torres nodded. "Commander Nakamura, your insights would be valuable. The attack profile suggests they knew our alert procedures, our response times, even our aircraft capabilities." Kira stood, moving to the display. "They didn't just hit us randomly, they systematically eliminated our defensive layers in the exact sequence that would prevent coordinated response." A young intelligence officer, Lieutenant Rodriguez, spoke up nervously. "Ma'am, if I may, there's something else. Satellite imagery from other naval installations worldwide shows similar attacks in the past 72 hours. Pearl Harbor, Norfolk, Yokosuka. All carrier-based aviation assets eliminated with surgical precision." The room fell silent. Tor's expression didn't change, but Kira saw her knuckles whiten as she gripped the edge of the table. "How many carriers affected?" "All of them, ma'am. Every operational carrier in the Pacific Fleet is either severely damaged or completely mission-killed." Rodriguez's voice was barely above a whisper. "We're effectively blind and defenseless across the entire Pacific theater." The implications hit the room like a physical blow. The United States Navy had built its global projection capability around carrier battle groups. Without air cover, every ship was vulnerable. Without naval aviation, entire regions of the world were now beyond American influence. Admiral, Chen said quietly, with respect, how do we fight an enemy we can't see, using technology we don't understand? Torres straightened, and for a moment Kira saw why the woman had risen to flag rank. The same way the Navy has always fought impossible odds, Commander. We adapt, we improvise, and we refuse to surrender. She turned to face Kira directly. Commander Nakamura, I understand you've been briefed on Project Valkyrie. Only that it exists, ma'am. It's an experimental aircraft, developed in complete secrecy over the past 5 years. Theoretical technology pushed to its absolute limits. The design incorporates principles that most of our engineers consider impossible. Torres paused. There's only one prototype, and it's never been test-flown. Kira felt destiny settling around her like a familiar flight jacket. Ma'am, are you asking me to fly an untested prototype into combat against an enemy that just eliminated our entire Pacific Air Wing? Torres met her eyes with the steady gaze of someone who had made impossible decisions before. Commander, I'm not asking, I'm ordering. The briefing room seemed to hold its breath. Outside, the Pacific stretched endlessly dark, hiding threats that challenged everything they thought they knew about warfare. But in that moment, Kira felt something she hadn't experienced in months of mandatory leave and corporate consulting: purpose. Yes, ma'am, she said simply. The hangar bay where Project Valkyrie waited felt like a cathedral dedicated to the god of flight. Work lights cast dramatic shadows across the space, and the few personnel present moved with the reverence of acolytes approaching something sacred. Kira followed Admiral Torres down a catwalk that overlooked the hangar floor, her footsteps echoing in the vast space like a countdown to destiny. Commander, Torres said quietly, what I'm about to show you is classified beyond your current clearance level. The existence of this aircraft, its capabilities, even the theories behind its design, all of it disappears into the black world after tonight. They reached a blast door marked with warnings in multiple languages. Torres placed her palm on a biometric scanner, and heavy motors engaged with a mechanical symphony. As the door split apart, bright lights spilled out like revelation. The aircraft beyond defied every convention Kira thought she understood about aviation. It wasn't built. It appeared to have been grown, its surfaces flowing together in organic curves that suggested movement even while stationary. The fuselage was obsidian black, but as light played across it, deeper colors emerged like oil on water. No visible engines, no control surfaces, no weapons hardpoints, just a perfect teardrop of dark metal that seemed to absorb light and sound equally. My God, Kira breathed, stepping closer. What is it? Dr. Elena Vasquez emerged from beneath the aircraft, her coveralls stained with exotic lubricants and her gray hair escaping from a ponytail. She looked like someone who had spent her entire career pushing the boundaries of what was possible, only to finally break through into territory that shouldn't exist. Commander Nakamura, Dr. Vasquez said, wiping her hands on a rag. I'm the chief engineer on this project, and I have to tell you, this aircraft shouldn't work. Everything about it violates known principles of aerodynamics, materials science, and energy generation. Kira walked slowly around the prototype, her trained eye searching for familiar elements. Landing gear that retracted into seamless hull surfaces. A cockpit canopy that appeared to be carved from a single piece of transparent aluminum. Wing surfaces that seemed to shift and flow as she watched. How does it fly? She asked. Honestly, we're not entirely sure. Vasquez joined her beside the aircraft. The propulsion system is based on theoretical work in electromagnetic field manipulation. Instead of pushing against air, it appears to alter its relationship with local gravitational and electromagnetic fields. Tor stepped closer. The design team reverse-engineered technology from unconventional sources, materials that shouldn't exist, energy systems that challenge our understanding of physics. Kira felt a chill that had nothing to do with the hangar's air conditioning. Admiral, are you telling me this aircraft is built using alien technology? The silence stretched between them like a bridge over an abyss. Finally, Torres spoke. Commander, 12 hours ago I would have called that question ridiculous. After what happened to our fleet, I'm prepared to consider possibilities I never thought I'd face. Dr. Vasquez activated a control panel, and the aircraft began to change. Surfaces that had appeared solid became translucent, revealing internal structures that pulsed with soft blue light. The cockpit canopy dissolved, opening like a flower to reveal a pilot station that looked more like a neural interface than traditional flight controls. The control system doesn't use conventional stick and rudder inputs, Vasquez explained. It reads neural patterns, translates thought into action. The pilot doesn't fly this aircraft, they become part of it. Kira stared at the organic curves of the pilot's seat, designed to cradle a human body while somehow connecting it to systems beyond current understanding. Dr. Vasquez, has anyone actually flown this? Computer simulations only. The neural interface requires a pilot with specific psychological and physiological traits, someone capable of maintaining coherent thought patterns while interfacing with systems that operate outside normal physics. Torres placed her hand on Kira's shoulder. Commander, your psychological profile suggests you're one of perhaps 3 people on Earth capable of piloting this aircraft. Your combat experience, your ability to maintain function under impossible stress, it all points to you being uniquely qualified for this mission. Around them, the hangar seemed to pulse with possibility and danger. The Valkyrie waited like a sleeping predator, beautiful and terrible and completely alien. Outside, an unknown enemy controlled the skies with technology that made human aircraft obsolete. Kira reached out and touched the aircraft's surface. It was warm, almost alive, and for a moment she could swear she felt something looking back at her. The pre-flight briefing took place in a secure compartment 3 decks below the hangar, surrounded by electronic countermeasures that could defeat any known surveillance technology. The few officers present represented the highest levels of Naval Aviation Command, and their faces carried the weight of decisions that would reshape the nature of warfare itself. Commander, Admiral Torres began, spreading classified photographs across the table. Our latest intelligence indicates the hostile aircraft are regrouping approximately 200 miles northwest of our position. Satellite imagery suggests a formation of at least 12 units, hovering at precisely 50,000 feet. Kira studied the images, though calling them photographs seemed inadequate. The enemy aircraft appeared as distortions in the sky, visible only as subtle bends in light and shadow. Ma'am, how are we tracking them if they're electromagnetically invisible? Commander Chen answered, her voice tight with professional frustration. Gravitational anomaly detection. The aircraft appear to generate localized gravitational fields that we can track using modified space-based sensors. It's not precise, but it gives us general positioning. Dr. Vasquez activated a holographic display showing the Valkyrie's theoretical capabilities. The neural interface should allow you to perceive these gravitational distortions directly, almost like a sixth sense. You'll be able to see them even when conventional sensors fail. The mission parameters appeared on the main screen, and Kira felt her stomach tighten. Single aircraft engagement against multiple unknowns, using untested technology, with no backup or support. In her 15 years of naval aviation, she had never been handed odds this impossible. Commander, Torres continued, your primary objective is intelligence gathering. We need to understand what we're facing, how their technology works, what their intentions might be. Combat is secondary to survival and data collection. Lieutenant Rodriguez, the young intelligence officer from earlier, looked up from his tablet. "Ma'am, there's something else. Signal intelligence picked up transmissions during the attacks. The language is unusual." He activated an audio file, and the compartment filled with sounds that weren't quite words. Complex harmonic patterns that suggested communication, but operated on principles human vocal cords couldn't reproduce. The rhythm was hypnotic, almost musical, but underneath it carried implications of vast intelligence and complete indifference to human concerns. Linguistic analysis suggests artificial origin, Rodriguez continued, either generated by advanced computers or by biological entities with completely different vocal structures than anything on Earth. The implications hung in the air like smoke from a crashed aircraft. If the attacking forces weren't human, if they represented technology from beyond Earth's atmosphere, then every assumption about warfare, diplomacy, and humanity's place in the universe would need recalculation. Dr. Vasquez pulled up the Valkyrie's weapon systems. The aircraft is equipped with what we're calling coherent energy projectors. Instead of conventional missiles or guns, it fires concentrated electromagnetic pulses that can disrupt matter at the subatomic level. "Disruptor beams," Kira said flatly. "Essentially, yes. The targeting system is integrated with the neural interface. You think about what you want to hit, and the aircraft translates that intention into weapon deployment." Torres stood, her expression grave. "Commander, I need to be clear about something. If you don't come back from this mission, if the Valkyrie is lost or captured, we have no backup plan. This aircraft represents our only chance to level the playing field against an enemy that has effectively neutralized our entire Pacific Fleet." Kira looked around the table at the faces of career officers who had dedicated their lives to naval aviation, now confronting the possibility that everything they knew about air combat was obsolete. "Admiral, what about other nations? Are we coordinating with allied forces?" Every major naval power has suffered similar attacks. The British, French, Chinese, Russian carrier groups, all eliminated within a 72-hour window. Whatever force is responsible, they've systematically removed human naval aviation as a factor in global affairs. The compartment fell silent except for the subtle vibration of the carrier's engines. Outside, the Pacific stretched in all directions, no longer a highway for American power projection, but a vast battlefield where the rules had changed overnight. Kira stood, feeling the familiar weight of pre-mission preparation settling on her shoulders. "When do I launch?" Torres checked her watch. "Dawn, we want you to have maximum visibility for your first flight in the Valkyrie." She paused. "Commander, good hunting." At 5:30 hours, the Gerald R. Ford's flight deck began its ancient ritual of preparing for combat operations. Deck crews moved through the pre-dawn darkness with practiced efficiency, their colored jerseys identifying their roles in the complex ballet of naval aviation. But this morning felt different, electric with possibility, and heavy with the knowledge that traditional carrier operations might be ending forever. Kira stood beside the Valkyrie in the hangar bay, running through final systems checks with Dr. Vasquez. The aircraft seemed different in the pre-flight environment, its surfaces more responsive, almost eager. Work lights reflected off its obsidian skin in patterns that suggested movement even when the craft was completely stationary. "Neural interface calibration is complete," Vasquez reported, consulting a tablet filled with readings that looked more like brain scans than engineering data. "The aircraft has mapped your specific neural patterns and should respond to your thought patterns within normal parameters." "Dr. Vasquez," Kira said quietly, "what constitutes normal parameters for an aircraft that shouldn't exist?" The engineer smiled grimly. "Commander, we're about to find out together." Admiral Torres approached across the hangar floor, flanked by Commander Chen, and a small group of senior officers. Their faces carried the weight of sending someone into combat using technology they didn't fully understand, against an enemy that had already proven superior to everything in the American arsenal. "Commander," Torres said, "final intelligence update. Our gravitational sensors indicate the hostile formation has maintained position northwest of our location. 12 distinct contacts, altitude 50,000 feet, holding in perfect formation." Kira nodded, her mind already shifting into combat mode. The pre-mission calm settled over her like a familiar flight jacket, heart rate steady, senses sharp, fear transformed into fuel for the impossible task ahead. "Ma'am, if I encounter these aircraft, what are the rules of engagement?" "You are authorized to defend yourself and this carrier using any means necessary," Torres replied. "But remember, intelligence gathering is your primary mission. We need to understand what we're facing." The hangar bay's massive elevator began to activate, raising the Valkyrie toward the flight deck above. As they ascended, Kira could see the first hints of dawn on the eastern horizon, painting the Pacific in shades of gold and crimson. It looked like any other sunrise, but somehow she knew the world would be different by sunset. On the flight deck, the Valkyrie drew stares from every sailor present. Even crew members who had seen decades of advanced aircraft couldn't hide their amazement at the prototype's alien beauty. It sat on the catapult like a piece of night that had taken solid form, waiting to return to its natural element. Dr. Vasquez helped Kira into the cockpit, adjusting neural interface contacts that felt warm against her skin. "Remember, don't fight the aircraft. Let it show you what it can do. Your job is to guide its capabilities, not control them." The canopy began to close, sealing Kira inside a cocoon of advanced technology. As the neural interface activated, she felt her consciousness expand beyond her physical body. Suddenly, she could sense the carrier's electromagnetic fields, the movement of aircraft in the distance, even the gravitational pull of the Earth beneath them. "Ghost 1 forward control," came the voice on her radio. "You are cleared for departure. Godspeed, Commander." The catapult engaged, and the Valkyrie accelerated from 0 to flight speed in seconds. But unlike every other carrier launch in her career, this one felt like ascending into another dimension. The aircraft didn't push through air. It flowed with forces that conventional physics couldn't explain. As the Ford fell away beneath her, Kira felt the Valkyrie's true nature awakening. This wasn't just flying. This was something closer to becoming one with the sky itself. At 20,000 feet, the Valkyrie revealed capabilities that redefined Kira's understanding of flight. The aircraft didn't just move through air. It seemed to dance with fundamental forces of physics, treating gravity and electromagnetic fields like instruments in a cosmic orchestra. Through the neural interface, she could feel the Earth's magnetic field as clearly as wind on her face, sense other aircraft as warm spots in a three-dimensional map of space and energy. "Forward control, Ghost 1, she transmitted, her voice steady despite the otherworldly sensations flooding through the interface. "Climbing to 50,000, heading northwest toward the contact area." "Copy, Ghost 1. Be advised, gravitational sensors show the hostile formation maintaining previous position. 12 contacts in perfect formation, no movement for the past 6 hours." The ascent felt like swimming upward through layers of reality. At 30,000 feet, the sky deepened to a darker blue that reminded her of the deepest ocean. At 40,000, the curvature of the Earth became visible, and she could see weather patterns stretching across the Pacific like living maps. The Valkyrie climbed effortlessly, its exotic propulsion system drawing power from sources she couldn't identify but somehow understood through the neural link. At 45,000 feet, the gravitational anomalies appeared. Through the interface, she perceived them first as distortions in spacetime itself, regions where the normal flow of gravity and electromagnetic fields bent around objects that barely registered on conventional sensors. 12 distinct anomalies arranged in a perfect geometric pattern, hovering with the precision of mathematical equations made manifest. Ford Control, Ghost 1. I have visual contact with the hostile formation. But visual wasn't the right word. Through her enhanced perception, the enemy aircraft appeared as absences rather than presences, spaces where light and energy flowed around something that chose not to be seen. They were beautiful in their impossibility, like viewing the shadows cast by four-dimensional objects in three-dimensional space. As she approached, one of the craft broke formation. The movement was instantaneous and impossible, 0 to Mach 3 without acceleration, a 90-degree turn that should have generated forces capable of liquefying any biological pilot. Through the neural interface, Kira felt the hostile aircraft's approach like pressure against her consciousness, vast intelligence studying her with the detached curiosity of a scientist examining a new species of insect. "Contact is approaching my position," she reported, her voice remaining calm despite the implications of facing technology that made human engineering look primitive. "Attempting to establish communication." The hostile aircraft moved to within 1,000 feet, matching her speed and altitude with casual precision. This close, she could see its true form, not built but grown, its surfaces flowing like liquid metal shaped by forces beyond human understanding. It was larger than the Valkyrie, more complex, radiating power that made her own advanced prototype seem like a child's toy. Through the neural interface, something touched her mind. Not words, not images, but concepts transmitted directly from consciousness to consciousness. Intelligence vast and ancient and completely indifferent to human concerns. Curiosity about her unusual aircraft. Mild surprise that primitive beings had achieved even this level of technological advancement. And underneath it all, something that chilled her more than the enemy's obvious superiority. A sense of evaluation, as if humanity was being measured against some cosmic standard. The contact lasted perhaps 3 seconds, but in that time Kira understood more about their situation than months of intelligence analysis could have revealed. These weren't invaders in any conventional sense. They were gardeners, tending a cosmic ecosystem, and humanity had finally developed enough to require management. "Ford Control," she transmitted, her voice tight with implications she wasn't sure she could explain. "I'm breaking contact and returning to base. We need to talk." The flight back to the Gerald R. Ford felt like a retreat from revelation. The Valkyrie responded to Kira's thoughts with liquid grace, descending through layers of atmosphere while her mind struggled to process the implications of first contact with intelligence that regarded humanity, the way marine biologists might view a newly discovered species of plankton. The neural interface gradually reduced its intensity as they approached normal flight parameters, but echoes of the alien consciousness lingered in her thoughts like afterimages of staring at the sun. She had touched something vast and patient, and completely unconcerned with human concepts of territorial sovereignty or political boundaries. "Ghost 1, Ford Control," came the familiar voice of the carrier's air traffic controllers. "We show you inbound at Angels 20, requesting approach clearance." "Ford Control, Ghost 1 requesting immediate landing. Priority Alpha briefing required." She paused, knowing that her next words would change everything. "I made contact with the hostiles. It's not what we thought." The carrier's approach systems guided the Valkyrie through its landing sequence, but even this routine procedure felt different after interfacing with technology that treated physics more like suggestions than laws. The aircraft settled onto the deck with barely a whisper, its exotic systems powering down into dormancy like a sleeping predator. As the canopy opened, Kira found herself surrounded by the Ford's senior staff. Admiral Torres stood at the center of the group, her expression carefully neutral but her eyes sharp, with the intelligence of someone who had spent decades reading between the lines of impossible situations. "Commander," Torres said quietly, "preliminary report." Kira climbed out of the cockpit, feeling strangely disconnected from her own body after the neural interface experience. Admiral, the hostile aircraft isn't piloted by any conventional definition. It's controlled by artificial intelligence, but not the way we understand AI. This is machine consciousness that evolved beyond anything we've imagined. Dr. Vasquez stepped forward, her tablet already recording. Did you engage the aircraft? Test our weapons systems. No engagement, ma'am. The entity communicated with me. Kira paused, searching for words to describe something that had bypassed language entirely. Direct neural contact through the interface. It was curious about the Valkyrie, surprised that we had developed even this level of technology. Commander Chen looked puzzled. Surprised? Commander, what do you mean? Kira looked around at the faces of career officers who had dedicated their lives to naval aviation, knowing that what she was about to tell them would challenge everything they believed about humanity's place in the universe. They're not invaders, at least not in any sense we understand. They're observers, possibly guardians of some kind. Our development of nuclear weapons, space flight, advanced AI, we've triggered some kind of monitoring protocol. They eliminated our carrier-based aviation because it represents a threat to something. Tor's expression didn't change, but Kira saw her hands tighten into fists. A threat to what, Commander? I don't know, ma'am, but they're evaluating whether humanity is ready for the next phase of technological development, or whether we need to be constrained until we mature sufficiently. The implications hung in the air like smoke from burning aircraft. Earth wasn't being invaded. It was being managed by intelligence that viewed human civilization the way humans might view a colony of bacteria in a petri dish. Potentially useful, possibly dangerous, requiring careful observation. Commander, Tor said finally, how many of them are there? Kira looked up at the sky, where 12 alien craft continued their patient vigil over a world that had suddenly become much smaller and more vulnerable than anyone had imagined. Admiral, she said quietly, I think we're about to find out. The emergency briefing convened in the Ford's most secure conference room, 3 decks below the waterline, and surrounded by signal-blocking technology that could defeat any known electronic surveillance. The assembled officers represented the highest levels of naval command, their faces grave with the knowledge that they were discussing humanity's first confirmed contact with non-terrestrial intelligence. Ladies and gentlemen, Admiral Torres began, what Commander Nakamura experienced represents a fundamental shift in our understanding of Earth's position in the cosmic order. These are not random attackers or territorial invaders. This appears to be first contact with a species that has been monitoring human development for an unknown period. The holographic display showed tactical readouts from the Valkyrie's encounter, though the sensor data looked more like abstract art than conventional military intelligence. Energy patterns that shouldn't exist, gravitational anomalies that defied physics, electromagnetic signatures that suggested technology operating